Hi, David Mould here, and I have a new ad to share with you for the great controversy. Before I show you the new, let me remind you of the old. Back in '90, in Time magazine, we ran a 6-page ad for the great controversy. A lot of history there. This was our main graphic. I was shown America repudiating her constitution, but there were 6 solid pages. The church went ballistic, tried to block it, but that's a long story. If you really want that story, I'd suggest you go take a look at Adventist crime scenes, the one that's called The Role of the Watchman. That's where I believe you'll see it. Anyway, we have a new ad, and I'd like to share that with you. In fact, I'm going to read every word of it for you today. But I'd like to tell you why. I've been in this country since I was 18 years old. That's 1968, with the exception of 3 years, 74 to 77. I have never heard so much chatter about fascism, about the rule of law. I've never, in all those years. And it seems to me as though this country could be at a turning point. Something could happen. Now, I grant you that Donald Trump seems to be doing everything to shoot himself in the leg. As a matter of fact, I had a pastor visit me a few days ago, and while he was here, he said, David, I don't think Trump wants to win. I think he and Hillary have cut a deal where he might get all the infrastructure jobs if she gets in, because he's doing everything to kill himself. Well, whether he wins or not, the conversation is here. The conversation about what kind of an America are we going to be looking at in the future. And I just think, let me get to my notes here. I heard a military guy on CNN a couple of days ago talking about a mutiny in the troops, because if the commander-in-chief starts giving orders that are criminal or against the conscience of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they're going to revolt. They cannot obey orders, for example, for torture, waterboarding, indiscriminate carpet bombing, or the murder of the families of jihadists, which are all things that Mr. Trump has spoken about. So Mr. Trump has generated this chatter about the Constitution and about the rule of law, and I just think it's a God-given opportunity for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg, to make the point that if he gets in, she's moving to New Zealand, even though it might have been in jest, I think is profound. Where are you going to move to? Anyway. A few people are talking about this, but I saw it and I know it. Mr. Trump has promised the church more power if he gets in. And the question I have today is, power for what? More power, to do what? For those of you watching this who are Seventh-day Adventists, you know that this is precisely the scenario that has been painted for us in the Word of God. And of course we have the interpretation of that prophecy in Revelation 13 in this book, The Great Controversy. How can we, in a clear conscience, we Seventh-day Adventists, keep this book from the public now? How can we be content with that piece of garbage, The Great Hope? The world is clamoring to know what we know, and it's a sin. I think it's a height of wickedness for us to remain silent now while all these conversations are taking place about the future of America. Whether it's a Trump-led America, a Clinton-led America, what kind of nation will we be looking at? The question is, how do we get this book before the masses? I've already gone on record as stating that I don't believe mass mailings to every home are the best way. It has its place. But too many great controversies end up in the garbage. And it just hurts me to see that. And I think Mrs. White has given us the answer to that. I think she absolutely has given us the answer. I'm going to turn to the book Evangelism, page 130. Let me put on my glasses here. You might get a bit of a glare. But on page 130 of this book, Evangelism, there's a statement made in here that I'd like you to consider. She said, under the heading, Utilizing the Press, and I've read this before in our programs. I'm going to read it again because I think many of us just don't get it. It's what advertising can do, 1,000,000 foot soldiers couldn't. If you had 1,000,000 people going door to door, a well-ordered advertising campaign, those 1,000,000 soldiers wouldn't do 1% of what a good advertising campaign could do. So let me read this. We must take every justifiable means of bringing the light before the people. She says, let the press be utilized, and let every, notice that, every advertising agency be employed that will call attention to the work. This should not be regarded as non-essential. On every street corner you may see placards and notices calling attention to various things that are going on, some of them of the most objectionable character. And shall those who have the light of life be satisfied with feeble efforts to call the attention of the masses to the truth? Evangelism 128. Well, I just think it's a crime. I'd like to share with you the ad, and I've been doing a lot of writing. My son died back at the end of May, and it's like pressure being put on the grape. The juice is flowing. My juices are flowing. Instead of retreating, I'm going forward with more aggression. What I'm about to share with you today is likely to cost an arm and a leg, but it doesn't bother me. I believe God had me design and prepare this, and my duty is to bring it to you. If we get traction, if there are those watching this who see it and like it, then we can go forward with it. All right? The old ad, that's this one, I've already brought it to your attention. We never mentioned the Roman Catholic Church. We never did. We focused on the image to the beast, Protestant America. Okay? This one that I'm about to share, we have mentioned the Roman Catholic Church. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just, I'm going to put this in my lap in a moment, but there are 3 photographs that we've used. A photograph of the Pope, it's actually 2 photos, but it looks like one. A photograph of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and a photograph of the Great Controversy. We've mentioned the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. We've mentioned the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Yes, we have. We've mentioned the Bible, of course. And without mentioning Mr. Trump by name, we've mentioned him. We've mentioned Justice Ginsburg's jest. And of course, we've pulled 2 quotes from the Great Controversy. If you were advertising the Great Controversy, what quote would you pull? What quotes would you use? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that we could have pulled from, sentences. But I pulled from one section where she speaks about the speaking of the nation. She's going back to Revelation 13, and she's explaining what that speaking means. All right? I am going to read from that ad. The headline is, "He came, he saw, he conquered," referring to the Pope speaking at Congress last year and at Independence Hall. But what would Adams and Jefferson have said? That's the question. Now we move into the text. I might need my glasses for this. Not as young as I used to be, guys. And my eyes are just not what they used to be. When I joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1972, we were taught that the Bible, right up front, is the Bible. My Bible tells me, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." I'm not ashamed of the gospel. So we're putting the Bible right up front. When I joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1972, we were taught that the Bible predicted ominous signs to be fulfilled just before the second coming of Christ. Like most Christians, I already knew about wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famine, etc. But I knew nothing about the prophecies in the book of Revelation. I didn't know that among the signs in that book would be the emergence of radical religious intolerance in America. I'd had the word theocracy, quasi-theocracy there, but I changed it to radical religious intolerance. I didn't even know America was in the Bible. Yet it's so easy to prove now. If the church's flagship book of prophecy, the Great Controversy, is correct, specifically, if its interpretation of Revelation 13 is correct, then America the Lamb will one day repudiate her constitution and speak as a dragon. With the possibility of American fascism, there's that word, I put it in there, with the possibility of American fascism looming, and the chief agent of that movement promising the church more power if elected, It's not surprising that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have publicly joked about moving to New Zealand if he wins. Frankly, I'm distressed, and I am. Every word of this I've written, and it's just expressing what's on my heart. I'm distressed that at such a time as this, the leadership of the denomination of which I am still happily a part have opted to stick their collective heads in the sand and pretend they don't see what could be just over the horizon for America. Instead of bringing this book before America, that's great controversy, they're backpedaling away from it, even going so far as to publish a counterfeit dutifully stripped of any reference to the coming Holocaust. Now that might be extreme to some of you, but I've used that word deliberately. It will catch the attention of the Jews reading this ad. They're going to click on that website just by virtue of that one word and the fact that Justice Ginsburg joked about moving to New Zealand. No, I'm not writing it just for the Jews, but I'm not omitting them either. Mrs. White tells us in the last days, many of them will see the light and come over and join us. To thousands of us, this retreat, I'm referring to the retreat of the leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, to be putting out a piece of trash like the Great Hope at a time like this, that's unconscionable. To thousands of us, this retreat is unconscionable. We simply can't remain silent. Who's the we? Some of you watching this, plus myself. We can't remain silent. If you agree with me that we should be doing instead of just listening or going to church Sabbath after Sabbath, if you agree with me that we should be doing something, then I'd ask you to join me, and you'll see how as we get to the end of this video. We simply can't remain silent. That's why we're displaying an excerpt of this book today. Here is how the author of this prophetic work, Mrs. Ellen G. White, as early as 1884, defined what the Bible refers to as the speaking of the nation. Now, what quote would you use? There's only one that came to mind, and I went through many, but the one that jumped out at me, these two paragraphs are from page 442 of the Great Controversy. So we've used almost an entire column, maybe more than a column, of actual words found in the Great Controversy. That is to draw the readership into realizing this isn't just some flaky author writing. This is well-reasoned history and prophecy. It speaks with intelligence to the issues facing us today. And it was written initially 1884. Yes, there's the 1888 version, and the version that we sell, or we will be selling, is the 1911. But here goes. This is what I felt impressed to include. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. By such action, it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution that was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and the leopard-like beast. And the statement that the beast with two horns, that's America we believe, causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, which is the papacy, indicates that the authority of this nation, that's America, the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. Such action, Mrs. White continues, would be directly contrary to the principles of this government, to the genius of its free institutions, to the direct and solemn avowals of the Declaration of Independence, and to its constitution. The founders of the nation, here Mrs. White gets into the reasons for the existence of this nation and the principles upon which it was founded. The founders of this nation wisely sought to guard against the employment of secular power on the part of the church, with its inevitable result, intolerance and persecution. The Constitution provides that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, and that, quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States, end quote. Only in flagrant violation of these safeguards to the nation's liberty can any religious observance be enforced by civil authority. But the inconsistency of such action is no greater than is represented in the symbol, meaning the symbol in Revelation 13. It is the beast with lamb-like horns, the United States, that came up peacefully. It is the beast with lamb-like horns, in profession pure, gentle, and harmless, that speaks as a dragon. That's the change she's talking about. From the peaceful two-horned beast, horns of a lamb, ending up speaking like another Vatican, dictating, decreeing, ordering something that will be an act of homage to the papacy. We finished quoting Mrs. White. This is me now. And when it speaks, what will it say? I've interjected that question because I'm coming back to one sentence from the Spirit of Prophecy. It, meaning this beast, will demand obedience to strict Sunday legislation. Quote from page 604, all who refuse compliance will be visited with civil penalties, and it will finally be declared that they are deserving of death. That's the Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of Revelation 13, that this lamb will change, that the Constitution will be repudiated, that Sunday keeping will be set apart by law, and if you refuse to honor the day that the Vatican set up in place of the Sabbath of the Lord, you will ultimately be killed. That's what we believe is coming to the United States, and that's why I, as a Seventh-day Adventist, can't hear Mr. Trump promising the church more power and remain silent. I don't even think many of the leaders of the church know anything about what I've just said. All they know is that Donald Trump is a galvanizing force, and they're probably hoping they can ride him all the way to the White House. Death for refusing to go to church on Sunday? Madness. Islamophobia, maybe. And I use this word Islamophobia for the Muslims who might be reading this ad. In fact, I actually believe, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sunday legislation gets wrapped in Islamophobia, quite frankly. Something intended to make Muslims Christian, force Sunday worship upon them. She didn't say that, but I'm looking at the way things are going today and wondering if this legislation couldn't come out as an attempt to impose Christianity upon not just Muslims, but on every citizen of this country. And she says it's going to spread around the world. She doesn't say, meaning whether it's Islamophobia, she said enough. Today our ministry has undertaken the mammoth but necessary project of republishing an illustrated version of the Great Controversy. But we're nowhere close. When I set out to do this, I asked for 2 years. Those 2 years will be up at the end of this year. Because I don't have our book ready doesn't mean I'm going to keep my mouth shut. What's important is that people read the Great Controversy. The one we're attempting to put together requires an investment of $7 million for the photographs and to print the first 1 million copies. I'm not asking you for that now. I have reached a point where I've said, Lord, if I don't have one book, help me to design an ad which can draw the attention of the nation to the book itself. I don't care where people buy it. Actually, I wish they would pound the doors of the General Conference. Maybe they'll resurrect the review and start printing. However it's done, to put the pressure of the people on the church, bring the church in focus. Let Ted Wilson try and back away from it now, when people understand, and when people say to him, we're not interested in the Great Hope. We're not interested in that piece of trash you're peddling. We want to know, what is it that you Seventh-day Adventists know about what is coming, and you're being so quiet about it. Okay? We're nowhere close. Illustrated or not, I'd urge you to get a copy and devour it, meaning the book, Great Controversy, before some justification is found to limit access to it. Once you read it, you'll understand the significance of the Pope's visit to Congress and Independence Hall. You'll also understand just how close we might be to the last great prophetic fulfillment in the Bible. And then we end with these words, what thou doest, and I've left it dangling. You can finish it. Others might not know what it means. But for those of you who know your Bibles, you know full well these were the words of Jesus to Judas. That thou doest, do it quickly. If you're going to buy that book, is my message, buy it quickly. Lincoln Steed and I agree laws are coming that are going to ban this book. Okay? And we close with the picture of the Great Controversy. That's the edition we published in 1990. And of course, there's reference to our website, lrltv.org. That's the ad. I've got a few more words to say, and then I'll shut up. What is it going to cost? I spent much of last night going to the websites of the top 7 or so newspapers in this country. I've decided to narrow it down to 3 because it's so expensive. I know some of you watching this will think I'm a madman, but I'm going to give it to you precisely as I got it from the website of the nation's top 3 newspapers. Number 1, the Wall Street Journal. Number 2, USA Today. And number 3, the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal, for a full-page ad, want $354,000. $354,823.27. That's their rate for a color ad Monday to Thursday in their newspaper. USA Today want $199,000 Monday to Thursday, same thing, color ad. The New York Times want $158,000, $859. Okay? The reason for the discrepancy why the Wall Street Journal is so expensive is because of the clientele they pull, the readership they have. USA Today doesn't have it. New York Times, there may be some overlap there. But you're talking about the high end, the high rollers. We put an ad there, all it takes is one to catch the vision, and we could have the funding for the entire book. I don't know. All right? The ad should not and must not stand by itself. If we get the money to run it, it will not just be an ad. You need the services of a public relations firm that can transform this ad into a news story. That's what PR firms do. They'll send out news feeds to they'll send it up to satellite. Satellite beams it down to every newspaper on the face of the earth. That's what happens. Okay? Some newspapers will see it as a worthwhile news story. And I ought to tell you something. Mr. Trump is a phenomenon not just in the United States. In my homeland, Jamaica, I test the pulse, I call, I find out what people are thinking. They are watching nervously too what's going on here in America. I dare say it's the same thing in Russia. Mr. Putin's name has been invoked often enough. In China, Fidel, over in Cuba, everybody wants to know what is coming. This man is speaking about possibly dismantling NATO. The French will want to know, the British. I mean, it's just unbelievable. That's what a PR firm will do, okay? And they'll take it and make it into a news story. They'll take one ad, and before you know it, before the evening is over, it could be flashed to every media outlet on the face of the earth. Now, I ought to tell you this. I'm not asking you to send money for the ad now. No, you know why? Because I don't know that we're going to raise enough for it. Our goal is $500,000. And I don't want you to send a dime. What I'd like you to do is send a pledge. And I'll put that pledge form up on your screen. And you can see where there's room for you to fill out your name and your email address and how much you would pledge. And there's a running total in that box to the left which tells you how much has been pledged. I don't want to take anybody's money and then I can't run the ad. My goal is $500,000. I don't want to take significantly less than that and then turn around and say, oh, well, we didn't raise enough money. No, no, no. Don't you say, if you want to send funds just to keep us going, in support of our ministry, in support of our vision, in support of my big mouth, Yes, you can do that. Send funds to the ministry, but make sure it's non-designated, or you can put Great Controversy Project, but just not for the ad. Don't tie me down to using, if you send $100,000 today, and say this is for the ad. We'll put it aside, but I'm asking you not to do that. I would rather see what the pledges are. Okay? Well, I think I've actually said it. I think I've said pretty much everything that I want to say. I don't know. If I'm forgetting something, Lord, bring it to my memory. For once, maybe I'm under budget in terms of time. But he who hath ears to hear, let him hear. I'd like your support. I'm sick of belonging to a church that's run by a pack of cowards. I'm sick of it. Let's do something while we can. Amen.